Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hey folks, welcome back to another milestone episode of Side Quests. I am the series creator and producer, Matt, aka Stormageddon, and I am joined by two incredible guests. Of course, my partner in crime, my co-host, the one and only Geoff Moonen.
Hi there, everybody.
And we have a very special guest in the studio, literally the only one in the studio when looking at the camera. While Geoff becomes a disembodied voice, we have the one and only Sarah Moonen. Welcome back, Sarah.
Thanks, Matt.
It's always a blast to have our associate producer on the show, and you've guested on some main series episodes, but you have yet to do an episode of Side Quests, and I know how much you loved the game we're going to talk about today, so I was like, well, why don't we just do that? And you said yes, so here you are.
And here we are.
Here we are. So if you have somehow clicked on the link blindly without actually looking at what the content of this episode was.
Thank you for your trust and loyalty.
Yeah. We are going to talk about the Sabotage Studio developed and published Sea of Stars, one of my favorite RPGs of all time at this point, and easily one of the best indie games I've ever played. This came out back in 2023. It was kickstarted. It is from the same folks who did The Messenger, and it continues story within the same universe, or precedes story, depending on what you're looking at. More about that in the spoiler section. But this is one of those games that the minute I saw that it existed from a studio I already loved, I knew I had to play this. And so I guess to start, we'll talk a little bit about our background with the game. With older games, there's more storied histories. Obviously, it'll be much shorter, a shorter history here since this game only came out very recently. But for me, I was a huge fan of The Messenger. That was recommended to me by a YouTuber that I no longer really watch, but he was an advocate for this game and the studio. And so I was like, oh, well, that sounds fun. I guess I'll check it out. And absolutely fell in love with it. The Messenger, for those who haven't played, is like a side-scrolling Metroidvania, Ninja Gaiden-like kind of game. It's a precision platformer. It's really great. And I can't recommend it enough, but was already a fan of the studio. And then they said, hey, what if we made an RPG inspired by Chrono Trigger with literally Yoshinori Mitsuda on the soundtrack for guest tracks? What do you think about that? And I said, yes, I'm in. Whatever you want, I will give it to you. I'm in. I want to play this game. And then Geoff and I got very lucky to get review code for this game and get to play it when it came out, which was really awesome. Also, thanks to the wonderful folks over at Tinsley PR. Yeah. Geoff, I'm pretty sure your arc is basically the same, wasn't it?
Similar. I hadn't played The Messenger at that point, so I didn't know how much you loved it. Mm-hmm. And I remember how much good press it had gotten and how much it was like, oh yeah, that's on my backlog. I'm going to get there. And more than a few outlets talked about the Kickstarter that was coming out, and the key art for it, which turned out to be the cover art for the game, was beautiful. The materials that they had, and yeah, that sort of promise of, because a lot of indie RPGs have been made with that. Remember Chrono Trigger? We're gonna spiritually make a successor to that. Finally, guys, it's gonna be great. This one felt true. This was back in early 2020, because I've got my email open to the You Just Backed Sea of Stars, which we received April 14th, 2020, and it came out in 2023. So it was a worthwhile wait. And I remember the conversation with Sarah of, okay, we have to get this. I am going to put in the money to get the physical copy. I feel like we're going to want this. And I'm very happy we went that way. I had to wait a little extra time for the physical copy to arrive, which then meant when the game got here, yeah, as Matt said, we did get review codes. Thank you, Tinsley. But because of backing the physical copy, you get the previous rewards. So before the review code came, we filled out the survey that was, okay, you're getting the physical copy for the Switch. We can't get that to you day one, so we're going to give you a second. We're going to give you a digital code. What do you want that for? I don't know. PS4, sure. Also, your previous tier does include a digital copy. What platform would you like it for? I don't know. PC. Jesus. And then we got the review code, and I'm like, I can't hold all these limes. I went on to my one of my game night discords. It was like, does anyone want to play Sea of Stars? I can't give you the review code. That goes against. There's so many reasons why, but like when it comes out, I already can tell you it's going to be great. Who wants a free game? And I got to be an advocate for it on that direct of a level, and that felt great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's good
Yeah,
time.
my story about this is very similar and intertwined with Jeff's. Like most games, Jeff goes, "You're gonna love this. We got to get it." And I go, "Okay, I trust you. You know what kind of games I like." And then the next thing I remember is my object permanence for this game was completely lost. And Jeff's like, "We have 7 copies of Sea of Stars," and I'm like, "What the hell is Sea of Stars?" And he's like, that game that we'd been talking about." I was like, 3 years ago. Okay, sure. I'm sure I'm gonna love it. Give away those codes so we can each play somewhere, and let's share this with our friends.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's funny talking about multiple copies. So I impulse bought the week of Thanksgiving the physical copy from I Am 8-Bit because I already have it on Steam thanks to that review code. But I was like, I realized at that point, I'd not actually given Sabotage Studio money for this game. I did buy the digital copy of The Messenger when that came out, so I have supported the studio in the past, but I was like, when Jeff and I get review copies of games, I often still try to buy it on another platform just to, especially if I really like it. So with that said, I was like, well, this is in stock and they can send it, and literally 4 days later I had it. And so now I have the alternate cover art, like kind of beige scale, like the specialty art that they made for the special edition. The one I have has that cover art, and now I have the physical copy for the Switch, which is honestly where I originally wanted to play it, but we got the review codes for Steam. They were only able to get them for Steam, and I had a Steam Deck, which was close enough. But like to me, like classic RPGs like this feel like Switch games. I didn't play all of Persona 5 Royal until I got it on Switch and then fell in love with it. So like it feels right, and I'm excited. As of when we're recording this, the new campaign DLC hasn't come out yet, but
I'm pumped for it.
But I'm very excited for it. It comes out in the spring, and so I'm going to replay the original game. And I was originally going to do that on PS4 because I have it through PS Plus, and I was like, I want to play it on a different platform so I'd see what it was like on PS4. But now that I have the Switch copy, that's what I'll probably replay it on once I finish the other 3 RPGs I've gotten in the last 3 months.
I also played it on Switch, and I think it's the perfect platform for it. Our Switch copy came with some cool stuff too. Every once in a while, when you back a physical thing through Kickstarter, we've got like a little standee and there was maybe a keychain.
There was a keychain. I think there's a little art book as well.
Yeah. So, and you know, you get all these things before you know if you love the game. And we were like, what are we going to do with them? No, it is displayed on our shelf because we love this game so much.
We gambled and won on this one.
Yeah, the one I got came with a slipcover to put on the outside of the game and a pretty decent sized version of the game's map. And then on the other side, it's like a 2-sided poster. One side is the map of the world, and then the other side is like a big cast photo of all the characters. And so,
which feels of the era that it is paying homage to. Like that is a very 16-bit era kind of amount of pack-ins, of feelies, of world building that you can hold in your hands. The Kickstarter backer copy that we got, it
is so big.
It's so big, and it's oriented like a Super Nintendo cartridge or Super Nintendo game box.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the full like writing on it to make you think that it is, but it would sit right at home with any other Super NES cartridge box. So it's very much, we've talked about retro games and retro throwback titles a lot on side quests and on Fun and Games. And so this was one that understood the assignment top to bottom.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I'd say the same is true of the gameplay too.
Oh yeah.
And just the whole thing, not
just the
only
whole
the
damn
physical
thing.
boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely a game that is wearing its influences of Super Mario RPG and Chrono Trigger, among others, on its sleeve. And I really appreciate that. And I mean, those are 2 of my favorite RPGs of all time. Having, as of now, had played Sea of Stars and then played the remake of Super Mario RPG, and redabbled with Chrono Trigger recently. I haven't done a full playthrough in a while, but still messing with it and revisiting it for another project that I was a part of. This game is absolutely, it's not slightly influenced by a bunch of it is absolutely 100% homage to those 2 RPGs and others. It's wearing its influences very starkly on its sleeve, and that's in the music too. I mean, Mitsuda being a part of this soundtrack, even only having a handful of guest tracks, you hear those tracks and go, oh, this is the composer of Chrono Trigger. There's no doubt of it. It's very, and I do want to there's so much to talk about with this game, but I think the thing that makes this game so strongly connected to Chrono Trigger for me is the music, because Chrono Trigger is my favorite video game soundtrack of all time. And I can unequivocally say it's one of the best of all time. The game, there's debate, but the soundtrack, I feel like there's not. And this game's compositions by Eric Brown are just some of the best video game music I think ever made, and the fact that
it's beautiful.
This game has 3 soundtracks, not 1, not 2, but 3. It has a night version of most of the songs, a day version of most of the songs, and then pirate, like klezmer, like folky covers, like absolutely sea shanty covers of the whole soundtrack as well for the in-game actual band of pirates that are also a band.
And they didn't just have those as pieces of the soundtrack. When you go into any of the areas where the pirate band is playing the soundtrack, it actually pays attention to who's playing. If you walk up to the band and talk to any of the individual members, their instrument drops out. And when you close the dialogue box, it comes back in on beat and the animation matches.
Yeah.
When people walk in and out for whatever storyline reasons, they're able to utilize that. I don't know how well they'd be able to do that back in the 16-bit era, but utilizing tech now, that's that kind of detail that you want to happen. You don't notice it necessarily, but it adds to the world. And then when you do notice it, it's just like, you cheeky bastards. I love it.
It also made me feel bad to talk to the band because I felt like I was interrupting them.
Just like I was, in real life.
Interrupting them. I don't know. I feel like a guitarist, bassist, like that kind of instrument, you could talk to me and still play it, but I get it. I was kind of a lot, so they had to stop.
I know in the grand scheme of things, I'm no great shakes, but as probably the most learned and trained musician on this call, Sarah, don't do that. Please.
But yeah, I mean, the soundtrack is just kind of incredible. And it's one of the few soundtracks that even the lead up to the game or even after the game came out. So the soundtrack in all its entirety took a while to get to Spotify. But Eric Brown had a short EP of like one of the boss tracks and a couple of other songs. And like, I love a lot of boss music in a lot of games. But I forget what it's called. It's, I think, Enter the Elite, I think is the name of the battle.
That's what it's called.
Is probably one of my favorite boss tracks of all time. Battle On also is really great. But the thing about the music I think that is particularly nerdy for me, and this wraps into the narrative, is so this game exists in the same world as The Messenger. It's this connected universe. And there are story beats here that relate to The Messenger. I'm not going to go into detail on how until after our brief spoiler wall towards the end. But there's songs like The Frozen Peak and Hills of Determination that are exactly songs recomposed from The Messenger. And like, I've had story like homages or like cameos or character cameos that I've been excited about. But this is the first game where I got to a stage and heard the music and got excited about a music cameo because it was one of my favorite songs and stages from The Messenger. And that's just kind of how nerdy this game is, and I think something key to bring up at the very beginning because it's one of the many reasons why this has become one of my favorite games of all time.
And I appreciate the fact that with no knowledge of The Messenger, you can go into this game and enjoy it.
Correct.
And not feel the same level of some games when within a company, they reference each other or there's moments of like, oh my God, they've made this reference or this happened. Like in Like a Dragon, when Kiryu shows up for the first time, if you've never played any of the Yakuza games, you can look at it and go, this is probably a big deal.
I don't know who that guy is, but he seems important.
Right.
Whereas I actually haven't played The Messenger. I feel like I should state that here. And it didn't impact my enjoyment of the game at all. Now I need to go play it. Also, like Matt, after my many, many backlog games. But it's really exciting to hear that there's even more things that I didn't get. I have played Chrono Trigger and I have played Super Mario RPG and love it very much. So that's my touch points to this.
Yeah.
And both of those RPGs, again, it's not as if Sea of Stars is the first game to look at those and go, yeah, those are great concepts, great character tropes, great gameplay loops, great battle systems. Let's use those. I mean, honestly, half the time when the three of us go to cover a convention, if there's an indie RPG that goes, oh, there's timed hits like Mario RPG.
You send me to play it.
Yes. And I will happily play it. Like that's a great time. But I know that's something for you, Sarah.
Well, I mean, this maybe is a good time to talk about the combat system because much like Super Mario RPG, Paper Mario games, those are my favorite lineage of games. Something like Bug Fables took that same mechanic and just copied it, right? I feel like the thing that's really special about Sea of Stars is it's not just a copy. They made something that felt like a puzzle and a battle at the same time. And it felt nostalgic to that kind of battle with timed hits, but made it more of a puzzle and more fun for me.
Yeah, any of the locks that would happen. You would
Yeah, the lock puzzles.
Yeah, because something that you don't get from Mario RPG or Chrono Trigger is that there would be timers over the enemies you face. So you know how many actions you get before they do something. And if a bunch of icons with elements pop up, you know they're gearing up for something big.
Yeah.
And if you hit them with at least one hit per picture of those elements, you can disrupt them. You can stop them and they won't do that move. Especially for boss fights, that's a huge deal. And so sometimes you have enough turns to do that. Sometimes you have enough MP to work with or whatever it is. And sometimes you're SOL. So you have to sort of conserve. But yeah, I think with homages going on in the battle system, Sea of Stars does a lot of good, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. Each of these are complete loops, and we're going to put them all on top of each other. And the way that these cogs interact is going to bloom and open. You never have tons and tons of MP, but every time you just choose to attack, you're going to get some MP back. So it's a bit of management of big moves versus small actions to get things back.
And there are ways to attack with your element that don't involve MP too,
Yes.
right? I forget what they're called, but the little shards that fall around you.
Sort of the energy spheres that, if you choose to do a basic attack, the enemies will drop basically little orbs. And you can choose to absorb up to 3 of those to power up your character in their element, which is a very Chrono Trigger thing. Everybody has an element that they are attuned to. So if you want to use light magic, you use Zale. If you want lunar magic, you use Valere. And so you have to work with that balance as well. None of these are by themselves super complicated. It's in the interactions. It's in the choices made. They never give you a high capacity of anything, so you have to use. You have to use your items. You have to use your ingredients. You have to spend MP to be worth getting some back at all times. You don't feel like you're planning like some kind of general, but you do have to plan turns ahead.
But you don't feel stupid if you didn't know in advance what you needed. Much like with Chrono Trigger, you can switch in and out your party members to solve these puzzle battles, and I really love that. I hate when you pick a party and you go into a battle in an RPG and it's like, wow, I really wish I had my ice person for all these people who are weak to ice. No, this is great. You need your moons, you switch in Valere, and she can do it right away.
Yeah, an RPG that often doesn't get talked about, to my observation, when talking about Sea of Stars, is Final Fantasy X.
Yeah.
How at any time, if a character is available to your party, you can swap them in and it doesn't cost you a turn. So they were able to design all kinds of encounters and fights around each character's specific advantages. And you could build other characters towards those advantages, but like, oh, I need someone who could take out airborne foes. You're never going to be locked out of that. So they can put those in at any time, and you always have to keep that at the top of your head. One of the issues that happens a lot in RPGs and Metroidvanias and any game that gives you a lot of resources and strategies, if you're not keeping them at top of mind, you will often find yourself with, oh my God, since when could I do that? You got that ability like 10 hours ago, and we've never used it again. Well, that's why I forgot I had it. Sea of Stars keeps everything at top of mind by doing so.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. It's one of the big turnoffs of Octopath Traveler 2, actually, which is a sequel to a game I loved, is that as the boss battles got more complicated in that series, like they have a similar thing where you can cause the enemy to break and get stunned if you use certain weapon types, but not every character can cover every weapon type, and you can't switch in battle. And I love that mechanic, and it's not required to win the battles, but it definitely helps, especially boss battles. And it was always very frustrating when I would get, and it's why I dropped off it. I got to this one boss battle where I didn't have the right party makeup. I would have had to backtrack through a dungeon to switch party members, and it was just not like I just hit a wall, and so I kind of left it. I'll go back to it eventually. But you never get stuck like that in Sea of Stars because you can active swap at any time. It doesn't penalize you for swapping. You can still figure out those puzzles. And even then, sometimes you can't always figure out them, I know is a friction point for some people. But I mean, I think it makes sense. You should be able to solve every puzzle in every fight. That feels...
Yeah, sometimes you have to get hit.
Yeah, it feels unfair to stop every attack that every enemy could do. Like, that just doesn't make sense. You prioritize.
It feels like a struggle.
Right, exactly.
To your point about the ones where can't do that, I play games very differently when that's the case. I play with a guide because I want to make sure I'm bringing the right team to battle because I get frustrated and it's not fun. With this, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, and it's one of those battle systems also where because you don't have to grind because of the way XP is handled and leveling up is handled. Like I don't mind grinding in games. Fun and Games did
I do. I hate it.
Fun and Games did a whole episode about grinding and when it feels good and when it doesn't. And I think I don't like to grind, but I do like to clear a map of enemies. If the enemies are on the map, I like to fight my way through a dungeon fighting all the enemies because I feel like I'll have the best shot at being ahead on levels for whatever the next boss is.
It feels on curve.
Well,
Right.
but that feels different to me than being like, oh, I got to bring that person I hate in my party because they're 6 levels behind and I never use them.
Right.
So I need to level them up. And actually, Persona 3 Reload that we just finished, they have an interesting mechanic where you can go to this big clock and they're like, hey, who do you want to bring up to your level?
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting way of handling it too, because I've been grinding. I've been getting my people up really high, but nobody likes Junpei. Screw him. So I'm never going to have him in my party, but he shouldn't be level 30 when everyone else is level 70.
Which actually happened to us.
Yeah.
So I think within a few levels, that's literally how low he was before we finally went, fine. I guess you had some character development, but Sea of Stars, everybody levels up together.
Yeah.
Even when
Yes.
characters have temporarily leave the party or come and go, they will still be the same level when they come back. If a party member leaves the party for some reason, you get their equipment back.
Yeah.
Sea of Stars has a lot of points that are removing the friction that you sometimes forget in your nostalgia for older turn-based RPGs. And I think this is actually a good pivot point towards talking about the accessibility and the relics that Sea of Stars has, where there are a number of cool items and great relics that you can find, buy, or start the game with even, that you turn on or off, that for the most part will actually smooth out certain aspects of the gameplay experience, whether they will display HP and weaknesses, whether they will lower costs of things. I'm trying to remember what some of the relics do, but
I didn't use a ton of them in my gameplay, but it was nice to see that they were there, and as you got them, establish whether or not it was going to enhance your gameplay.
Right, and some of them actually do make the gameplay harder. Some of them
Yes.
can be done for challenges, but yeah, some of them give you, max HP, and they double your HP and auto heal you after every encounter. They'll reduce the damage you take. They will give you a clear indication that you successfully did a timed hit. They will. One of them lowers your HP to 5%, and enemies are invincible while they're casting, so you can't lock them. Timed blocks reduce damage to 1. Timed hits bonus damage is doubled, though. So it reminds me of the badges from Paper Mario.
Yes.
With a little bit of, on the making it a little easier for you. You don't get penalized for using them. It simply is a thing. You don't get like a baby bonnet on your head because you're using baby mode by turning on something. They don't have insulting names. They are, the thing that gives you auto heal after every combat is called the Amulet of Storytelling, because it's sort of giving you story mode that you can turn on and off at any point and help you through particularly tricky encounters. You get to choose how you're engaging in this struggle as you play.
Yeah, I think it's anything that modifies gameplay that's optional is always a good thing. A lot more games are doing it now. A lot more RPGs are doing it now. I mean, even Final Fantasy 16, that's the title, Final Fantasy 16, had like accessories that you could equip to the main character to then like make your animal companion attack automatically so you don't have to do button inputs for it, or more health or do more damage or whatever else. Like I think that I do sometimes prefer for them to just be toggles you can turn on and off like in this game, but even giving characters equipment that makes things easier for those who maybe don't want to struggle through the combat or just want to see the story or whatever, I think is always welcome and is becoming more common in RPGs, which I also appreciate.
Yeah, and especially because, as mentioned before, the imagery that I gave was a lot of the systems here are little cogs that turn a bigger machine. Sometimes a certain cog isn't your cup of tea in general or for a specific moment. And this is another way to remove friction. If you don't want to worry about how that wheel turns, you don't have to worry about it anymore. And because the point is to enjoy the game, to live in the world and experience the story.
Yeah. I think this game also handles tangentially to combat collectibles and extra items really well. I think that finding the conch shells is difficult enough that it's a worthy challenge to look for them, but also if you've missed a bunch of them and then go back through with a guide, it's not an impossible task. All the areas are accessible. There's not a ton of repeat fighting, or the enemies are easy enough for it. I think that a lot of games that have collectibles, there's either a ridiculous amount of them, or they're hidden too well and it's impossible to find most of them. I liken it actually,
or frustrating even with a guide.
Right.
Yeah.
And I liken this to,
says the person who's an Animal Well level player 3.
Well, it's funny. I liken it to actually Arkham Asylum. Not so much the later Arkham games, but Arkham Asylum has just enough Riddler trophies that if you get like half of them through the game, going back and finding the rest isn't difficult. It just takes some time, and the guides are really helpful for. And I like that in this, because when I beat the game the first time, I didn't have all of them, and to get the secret ending, which we're going to talk about in a spoiler section, you needed to go back and get them. And this is one of those few games that I think to really enjoy the complete narrative, you do have to get the secret ending, which they don't make an impossible task. They make it very approachable, whereas tons of other games with secret endings, I'm looking at you, Kingdom Hearts, tends to make them a little more insurmountable, which is fine too. Adding a challenge to that is fine, but in those games, I often just Google on YouTube what the secret ending is, whereas this, it felt very satisfying to actually get it for myself.
Yes, and we'll talk about that more in the spoiler section. But also, I had done most of those things by the time I got there in my first playthrough, because I'm a big collect all the things before you get to the end, because I don't usually believe in replaying anything a game or doing post-game content. And I had done most of it, but not all of it by the time I beat the game. And then we'll talk more about that in the spoiler section. And I thought it was fun because I love collecting things. I love doing things. And then I had a decision point of, is it worth it to me to go look up a guide, to go do the last little bits? And it was easy and it was fun.
And around that time, too, you do get not necessarily relics, but other aspects of the gameplay that make it a lot easier to go back and find those things. I always think of it as a disc 3 problem because I'm Final Fantasy VII trash forever. But that thing where you're like, all right, I'm almost to the end of the game. I'm trying to fill out the side quests. I'm trying to, you're checking in with the Guru of Time to hear what side quests there is to do, kind of thing, to keep with Chrono Trigger. But you're like, but where do I go? What am I missing? And you can look to the world map and you get something that will let you know you have everything here. There's stuff here. There's stuff here. And so it's not necessarily a one-to-one hand-holding, but it does start closing off pieces, and that's also a satisfying part of it while you're filling those in. And on the lighter side of it, there is crafting in terms of making recipes, which are making your healing items. I love doing that stuff. And there's just enough ingredients around, just enough stuff to find that I'm not doing what I did the first time I played Breath of the Wild, which was drive Sarah crazy by cutting down every blade of grass and collecting everything I found. Whereas this, you run through, you grab things, you get to a fire, a save point. Cool, let me cook some items. Do I have enough room to make more? Cool. It keeps things going and it keeps things exciting. And even if you're revisiting an area, there's a little bit of a tangible get without it feeling too either optimize-y or crafting systems and things. I find myself, if they go a little too deep or a little too in some direction I can't define, I will find myself being like, okay, I can't go there until I need to grab 5 different things. I don't need to grab 5 different things until I go fight this thing. And yeah.
So I don't know if I've been on the record as saying this, but I don't believe consumable items are to be consumed. They are to be collected and saved for if you eventually need them. And that is how I play all games. Crafting systems and cooking systems are one of my least favorite things because you're cooking things you might need. I'd rather just have the mushrooms I collect, and if I need it, I use it.
What if the final boss has a 5th phase?
Exactly. You don't know. What if you need it? And so Geoff has played a lot of games with me or as my guidebook and has watched me literally almost die because I'm afraid to use a consumable item that I might need in the 5th phase of the boss.
One day I might make my peace with it. I'm getting better.
Yeah, but Sea of Stars crafting, like, again, I didn't cook that much. It's funny that you brought that up. I'm like, did I cook in this game? I must have, because I must have had items to get through things, but that wasn't something I focused on.
Yeah, I mean,
because I never do.
I mean, but what I think I love also about Sea of Stars and its mini games and its like crafting systems is like the fishing system is pretty straightforward, pretty easy to do.
Yeah,
it's pretty easy to fish up everything you need for cooking. There is only one moment in fishing that in this game that made me want to throw my Switch out the window, and we'll talk about that in the spoiler section. But more often than not, I didn't mind doing it. I kind of had fun doing it, and it didn't take very long. And then the cooking, it had a similar vibe to me of like Monster Hunter and Dragon's Dogma 1 and 2, where it's part of the vibe of settling down, saving, and part of the plot. It felt kind of fun to cook, especially since one of the characters in this game, Garl, who is best boy, is
a chef.
Is this chef and is delightful. But I think now is also a really good time to talk about the aesthetics of the game, and then we'll start to get into the plot, which will lead to the spoiler section. So the pixel art in this game is some of the most gorgeous design I think I've ever seen in a video game.
So pretty.
We're actually very lucky that in the last few years we've gotten tons of really great retro-looking RPGs that could have never run on their base systems. I'm thinking of Sea of Stars, Echoes, Chained Echoes. There's been a bunch of them. I mean, all of the 2D HD games all look great and really have this distinct style. But what I love about Sea of Stars, and it leads into the gameplay a little bit too, is that there's some platforming in this game. Not really platforming that you can fail, but like walking across tight ropes, walking along cliff edges, jumping to climb up
traversal.
Cliffs. Right. It feels like a very simplified version of an Uncharted game or the like, where you're traversing stuff to get to the next area. And a lot of that, I think, hits because of how beautiful the game looks. We talked about the music in the beginning, but also the sound design of this game has some of the best sound design, I think, in a video game ever. And all the characters look distinct and look really interesting. And like the enemy design, the boss design is some of the coolest boss designs I've seen in a pixel RPG like this. I just think that these folks, like I said, did The Messenger, which was also a gorgeous looking game, much more simplified than this game, but still stark and beautiful in its design. And so like these folks definitely know what they're doing. And like, as gorgeous as it looked in still screenshots, getting to play it is a whole other animal. I don't think pictures of this game do the movement and even the parallaxing effects, how different things in the background and foreground move. None of that is done justice by the screenshots of this game. Not even close.
That's what I was gonna say. I like even places where you're like falling down waterfalls and there's just such great depth of field and so much going on. It was absolutely beautiful. And Geoff will tell you, in some of the older Final Fantasy games that we've played, I can't even tell the guys apart. I'm like, which blonde one is that? There was no risk of that in this game.
Edgar and Sabin are wearing two completely different outfits, okay?
All I see is blonde pixels, and I can't tell them apart, and you have to tell me which one's which and which one I'm controlling.
This is fair. But I think, too, the Messenger and Sea of Stars have very evocative designs that aren't terribly beholden to the genre trappings in which they find themselves. They're not afraid to go a little horror, a little sci-fi, a little mechanical, a little steampunk, while also being fantasy.
And pirates.
But the thing, too, is, your two main characters are basically a sun monk and a moon monk.
Who were you? Which?
I played Valere, my first playthrough.
I also played Valere because I always play the girl. I love when you can play a girl.
I liked playing Valere as well. She definitely had the more monk style, and I like monks. But the thing is, I bring this up because there is changing time of day. There is sunrise and sunset and nighttime and evening. And so all of these beautiful landscapes and these wild creatures and everything else has a beautiful lighting system and all of these great shadows and lengthening and shortening that goes on as well. Sometimes you change time of day in order to solve puzzles, and sometimes it's just gorgeous. And
I used to do that all the time. I'm like, this place is prettier at night.
Right. And then there's some of the more waterfall places and things you go, this needs to be bright midday. And as a quick aside, and as a definite here's one of those nice little pieces that lets you know they understood the assignment. There's treasure behind a waterfall.
Yes.
Of course there is. I checked every waterfall just in case, and then there was one.
Right. A game isn't a failure if there isn't treasure behind the waterfall.
I disagree.
Yeah. But I feel like it does better. And a game like this that's trying to play to these references and memories and styles that we're talking about, you got to hide at least one behind the waterfall. Even if it's the first waterfall you get to, there's nothing there, but you come back hours later and suddenly there is, that kind of thing. That's not what happened at Sea of Stars. But, if all you need to hear is there's treasure behind the waterfall, there is.
Yeah. Before getting into the plot, I just want to talk about the writing broadly. I think the comedy works really well in this game. I think that the writing, the more emotional beats hit really hard. This is a story about
so hard.
Yes.
This is a story about friendship, about Valere, Zale, and Garl's friendship above and beyond anything else. And I think the writing is handled really well. I think all the characters feel distinct when they're speaking. I think that even the characters meant to look the coolest have dorky moments, and we get to see them, and it's done really well. You know, broadly, this is a narrative about two Solstice Warriors who have to be trained to fight great evil, and the from training montages to their early years to how the game grows and evolves and the different characters you meet, I think is just done so expertly. I think there are tons of games where you can have this kind of story and it could be boring or kind of one note. I like that even though Valere and Zale are kind of silent protagonists in style, in the way that
Yes, they are.
the way it doesn't matter who you pick. You'll still get basically the same story and you get to use both of them in your party. It's just the one that you're controlling when you're running around the world. But I like that they are a little bit they do speak and they're a little bit beyond a silent protagonist. You can kind of put yourself on them in a similar way you would Commander Shepard in the Mass Effect games, where like Shepard has a personality, Shepard has a history, but you are still directing that character and making choices. There's less choices in this game, but you still are directing and in control of one of the characters, and that character has a little more agency than a true silent protagonist like Chrono would have, who says nothing and kind of just reacts to stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, in a funny way, that is Garl's purpose.
Yeah.
Garl is your friend that you've known since childhood, which isn't major spoilers. That's the first hour of the game. And if I had a major complaint about the game, it is a slow start.
Yes.
The battle system is fantastic from the get-go, and the mechanics are going to see you through to when the story gets meaty. You have to fall in love with some of these characters, and you will have opportunity if you let it. But Garl is sort of a little bit of the viewpoint character who doesn't have the magical destiny who's coming with you, and who is the one who can speak to people and speak to you, the silent protagonists. And because you have answers back to him, it doesn't feel quite as awkward as Chrono necessarily. But, you know, there are times where things happen for and to or through Garl because he's the one talking. And you're like, well, is he the main character or not? You're not asking the right questions. This is Zale, Valere, and Garl.
Yeah,
and
it's
they're
their
all
story.
serving different parts of it. Yeah, and it's beautiful. And yeah, the coolest characters get dorky moments. The dorkiest characters get cool moments. They let certain characters be more fourth wall breaking and self-aware than others, but not everybody is. This isn't a world where everybody is snarky and funny, but everybody has a distinct way, a sense of humor. I'm reminded of the recent Dungeons and Dragons movie, not the older one, Honor Among Thieves, where some characters are allowed to snark more than others, and that lets you get away with a lot more snark.
It does.
Yeah.
You can name this fast travel system Yeet. If you give it an apostrophe and make it a giant golem, it throws you. So what else are you going to do?
Yeah, I think that the world is so lush and so well lived in and feels so realized that I think also it is basically a character like any good RPG would have, where the main thrust of the world and you moving through it is also kind of a character to itself. All right, so this seems like a good point for us to jump into spoilers. And so if you want to play this game without knowing anything about anything narrative, then I would stop here and come back to this after you have played it.
And I would recommend playing this game without spoilers if you can.
Yeah. That said, also, if you are here and like, well, I'll listen to a little bit of the spoilers, we're not going in chronological order. The first thing we're going to talk about is probably the biggest spoiler in the entire game. So again, if you want to play this game without any spoilers, jump out here. You've gotten about 30 minutes of praise of this game. Go check it out and then come back later. If you don't care about spoilers, or you don't plan on playing the game and want to just hang out because you like hearing our dulcet tones, then welcome. Here we go. So
this is your last chance, because it being the story of Zale and Valere and Garl, and the fact that this has got Chrono Trigger things, this game shows you how devastating it would have been if Chrono talked when he died.
Yeah.
Garl, I would do anything for him. I haven't cried at a video game in a long time. When Garl died and the entire town started mourning him, when you took time away from your adventure to mourn and to feel with your people, I was like, whoa.
Their character portraits shifted.
Yeah.
They did.
You not only buried him and mourned him, you buried him also. You didn't just mourn him, you buried him. There was a grave for him that you interact with. It's just
There was consequence.
Yeah, it's a brilliant storytelling tactic because characters die in RPGs all the time, sometimes impactful and sometimes not. And like the death of Chrono is sad. I don't know that I cried the first time Chrono died, but it was definitely sad, but it was a sad moment that you moved on from pretty quick.
It was shocking.
Right. Whereas in this, the way they killed Garl, I thought that was it. I thought he was done. And the fact that
And he saved us. He sacrificed himself to save us.
Like, yeah, he got the send-off. He got that, like, one last adventure. He got a full fulfilling of a prophecy.
Yeah. And so, like, it makes it that much more joyous and impactful when you can bring this character back and how you do it. But I will say that narrative beat does feel like completely lifted from Chrono Trigger, which is fine. I can only think of 2 video games in the history of video games where the character dies and you bring them back. I think they're doing just fine. But it was done differently here.
Yeah,
yes.
You don't you beat the game not having brought him back.
Yeah.
You beat the big bad without Garl.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to roll credits.
Yeah, so you roll credits, and then as we were talking about before, there are secrets that you have to unlock in order to get the true ending, right? There are these pillars of stone, and I finished the game, and I think I had all but one done. I don't know what your experience was, but I had done all of the collecting things. I just hadn't gotten all the conch shells.
Yeah, that was it for me too, I think.
That was, yeah. And so there's a bunch of things you have to do, and if you do all of them, you get to resurrect Garl, and he gets to come do the final fight with you again.
Yeah.
And you actually beat the big bad instead of just staving them off.
Yeah. It's really brilliantly done, and I think that the fact that you have to beat it without him, because the difference with Chrono Trigger is Chrono Trigger, you can bring Chrono back or not either way, and like you can beat the game with or without him. It just gives you a different ending. Whereas this, you have to get an ending without Garl in order to bring him back. It is required as part of the narrative, which I think is really well done. And the way they handle it is really well done. Though I will say, the only thing I am not looking forward to replaying is that stupid fishing boss. I spent hours trying to catch him. It was so damn hard. I was so pissed. Beyond that, though, the rest of the game, like, there was friction points, but nothing that actually actively made me upset.
And I think the notion of how the death of a major character and the resurrection and everything, how it's done in Sea of Stars versus Chrono Trigger speaks well to the major themes in either of their narratives. Because Chrono Trigger is a game about time travel, about averting a specific day. You have a fixed point in time that you're working your way around. And so you are traveling through the quote unquote fourth dimension. In addition to making all these things happen, you can leave Robo, an automaton who can theoretically live forever, in one time and then come back several hundred years later and pick him up, kind of thing. Sea of Stars, it's more about lineage and destiny and choice. It is always about choice. When do you end the game in Chrono Trigger? How far do you go in Sea of Stars? Zale and Valere are part of a lineage of Solstice Warriors who can become great gods if they just achieve and if they just do. And the previous generation of Solstice Warriors become antagonists.
Well, so let's talk about this a little bit, because one of the things that I thought was really interesting about Sea of Stars is there's this you're the chosen one, and there's people who like ignore their destiny, or there's people who go and fight the world. We had something in the middle in this game, right? Like the generation of Solstice Warriors before us decided, screw this. I don't want to have to do this. So I'm going to work for the other side so that I don't have to fulfill this destiny.
Right. And you kind of get the vibes at the beginning that those guys are on your side, and your mentor has got some shady stuff going on. Has got a little bit of the like, we don't talk about everything secrets, but he's just a good guy and has just been a little hardened by things. And it's your guys, your mentors,
when mommy betrayed me, I was very upset.
Yeah. It's like aunt and uncle, like cool aunt and cool uncle, totally like, oh no, all the ways that mom and dad said they sucked were true. No, kind of thing. But it's that idea of the things that Solstice Warriors are fighting feel inevitable. It's fighting sin in Final Fantasy X. It's, are we really making the world better, or are we just staving something off? Is that even worth it? Yes. That's what the game says. It is always worth it.
Well, but it doesn't at first. When you beat the game the first time, technically they were right? We only held it off for a little bit. We didn't really win.
Yeah.
We had to resurrect Garl to come back and win.
Which shows outside of destiny, sometimes it's choices. Garl, from the word go, from before the word go, wants to adventure. He wants to support his friends. He wants the Solstice Warriors to succeed, and he never sees himself as one. He wants to do everything he can to make sure everybody's well-fed and happy, to make sure people in a new town are settled and feel safe. He wants to make sure that even if he can't fight off dwellers of woe and pain and torment, that he can still make life good. And so when the world is saved, it's a world we want. And so having someone like him as part of, maybe not, that's not the person you prophesize, but these are the people, and these are the choices, and these are the social ideas and the communities that are embodied in a single person. Garl, in my notes, is Steven Universe coded. Very affectionately.
Absolutely.
And it's that kind of thing of those choices matter just as much as destiny and training and everything else.
And he's not the only one. We haven't talked about Sarai at all either. So we also have this character, Sarai, who I actually thought it was a great reveal because her whole deal is she's obviously the sea captain and also your party member. They both have bandanas across their face. They're clearly the same person. I'm like, man, this is going to be such a boring reveal. No. Turns out she's a robot from another dimension. And it's way better than you thought because there's this like small subplot that doesn't matter and this big plot that does, where she's trying to save her reality too. And in completing this quest and this mission, you get to help her with her destiny also, that she has chosen to come out, find Solstice Warriors to fight and to save her world.
And you see that the fight is so much bigger than you thought. You thought it was just saving the world, and it is, but it's saving the worlds.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that you have a red herring, a bunk reveal that's for comedy purposes to lead into that actual reveal, I think just adds to the impact of it. Also, I like that every moment in this game that is attached to the messenger is for messenger fans, but if you don't, it just looks like a cool moment. I mean, a big one for me is Brugavs, one of the mentors.
Boy mentor.
Actually, yeah, the boy mentor.
Yes.
Because there's no voice acting, so
I just
have
call
no
them boy
actual
mentor
idea
and
how to
girl
say it.
mentor. It's fine.
Call him Brugal.
But at the end of the game, if you get the secret ending, it reveals him to be Barmathazel, which is a devil character who is your main antagonist in the messenger. And so this shows that this is a precursor to the messenger and that there are more connections than we thought, not it just being the same world. And I love that too. But if you haven't played the messenger, then it's just a reveal that, oh, this guy became a demon because he turned out to be really evil after all, when truly devoting himself to these terrible people. And so I like those kinds of nods as well. I think also all of the characters are done so well. I mean, there are small spoilers early in the game, like who we find out the archivist is, which turns out to be Rashan, who's related to the big bad, and there's crossover there. This game has a bunch of really great story beats that kind of or even getting Beast and how he fills in the party and how he's created. And he starts as a wandering party member that's not really an active combatant and then grows into this character that comes along with you. And I'm excited to see how the Artificer as a playable character will be a part of Throes of the Watchmaker, right? Because we interact with the Artificer through that back third of the game, but then he goes on his way and he's integral to the secret ending. But I'm really excited for him to be a party member because we're going to get a new party member in this DLC as well. It's just,
and will he be
really
young or old because he's left the tower? Right. And yeah.
And I think what also this game does really well is how all the characters are used and that they're all important. Even Teeks, Valtrid, Keenathan, Yolanda, all the pirates, even the smaller characters like Duke of Entry, Stormcaller, Hortense, all of the villains, all of the sidekicks, all of the servants, they all have purpose, fun lines, and are well developed. There are very few one-off characters that you never see at least a second time. They are all kind of integral to this plot, and I think that's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Teeks. I love that you have an archivist coming along with you to learn and tell your stories. And when Garl died, that was one of the hardest things for me, being that this is where that story ends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not. Thankfully. Yeah. But I was very upset, you guys. I'm tearing up even thinking about it.
I am a little bit too, geez.
Yeah. It's something that I look forward to replaying through because I'm not sure how it'll hit me a second time through. I mean, I'm a sucker. I cry. It's very easy to make me cry playing video games. I've cried a lot playing the Yakuza games, but like I do think it's really interesting to experience this game that way, and how hard it'll hit on a repeated playthrough, because that shows the real impact of the emotional moment. Can it get you more than once? And the fact that you guys are tearing up talking about it means
Maybe.
it probably would.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's the thing too, where there are games and there is media that has plot twists and reveals that you're like, okay, cool, and that's fine. But the best ones are always when you play the game again, when you relive the story, you see those references. And because this is a prequel sequel connection to The Messenger, that already had that element of reliving the story and going, oh my God, and the sunken temple, and the artificer is 5 kids in a trench coat, oh my God, and all of this stuff. So you're already getting those relived beats. And so Sea of Stars, and also the current update that they got allows for multiplayer. So I think Sarah and I are going to do a playthrough where we actually play it together and not just me on guidebook, which is also a valid and wonderful way that we play games together. But I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how we're going to argue and problem solve together if we each pick a Solstice Warrior.
Yeah, I'm Valere still. Sorry.
God damn it.
I play girl.
Yeah, I know.
I think that would actually be a fun way to engage with it on the PlayStation, right? Being able to sit in front of the TV on the PlayStation 5 and play it multiplayer. I think that's really fascinating.
I mean, we could do it on the Switch too. Just put the Switch on the TV.
I mean,
we mostly use it as a mobile game, but it can be on the TV also.
No, of course. I don't know. I only play my Switch handheld, so like it falls out of my brain.
Well, I have a light, so I can only play mine handheld. But Jeff's got an OLED, so.
And we've got there's three party members, and it allows for up to 3 players. But Sarah and I are just 2 people. Maybe some point the 3 of us can sit down if we're all in one room together and see how it all plays like that. But I don't think we'll get a full playthrough that way. But someone else might.
What do you consider a full playthrough? So I was looking at my, Nintendo Wrapped or whatever it's called, and I apparently spent over 40 hours on Sea of Stars. When I was Googling this morning just to refresh myself on everything, they were like, a typical playthrough is 20 hours. I'm like, what typical playthrough were you playing?
Well, right. Well, it's like in any game that has a certain way to achieve an ending, or a certain thing to get a bonus ending or a post-credit scene, the how long to beat on like the just base game is not accurate. It's like the new Dragon Age. It said, oh, you could beat it in like 10 or 12 hours. I was like, on what planet?
Yeah. So looking up the how long to beat as of the day we're recording this for Sea of Stars, the main story takes 28 hours on average. Completionist is 43 hours, and main and extra is around 35 and a half hours. So Sarah, you're well on average.
Okay. So I did Completionist just faster than other people. That makes me feel good.
Yeah.
That's exactly
it. I mean, it is an average, but yeah. So I think at this point, like, I don't really know what else to say about this game other than I think. Now, look, on repeated playthroughs, it may not hold up in that upper echelon in the same way. It is in my top 10 games of all time. It will probably remain there for a while, but like I don't know that I knew Chrono Trigger was my favorite game of all time when I first played it, or even the third time I played it. I think as I've gone over the years, but there's no way this game will ever go down the list on favorite RPGs of all time, because it's serving me specifically. I can absolutely see how someone might not enjoy this game, right?
Of course.
It is catering to a very certain kind of audience and a very certain kind of retro RPG player. But I think if you broadly like retro RPGs, if you broadly have love for Chrono Trigger and classic Final Fantasies, there's a lot to love here.
And if you like challenging but not impossible puzzles in your RPGs too. I think that's one thing we didn't really talk about, is that I felt so smart every time I solved a puzzle, but they were not easy.
No.
Right? I didn't have to look them up because they were so hard, but you could get there. And this is something we could have said before the spoiler wall, but even still, every time you went to a new place and there was a new style of puzzle you had to figure out, you're, making water go up and down in rooms, you're moving around blocks, you're doing things like it hits a nostalgia for kinds of puzzles that you've done before, so you have the toolkit to solve them, but you still got to work at it.
Yeah, it's that thing where it is strict in its success, but it is forgiving in its failure. If you screw up a sliding block puzzle, it takes next to no time to reset it. And doing the sliding block puzzle takes next to no time to do. You have a little gauntlet that lets you shoot a gust of wind to slide things around. It's so much faster than most of the time when I think of sliding block puzzles. That's the other thing. If you're somebody who thinks they would like and are intrigued by older RPGs, but are like, God, there's random battles. There's so much it's so slow. I don't have the nostalgia to see past this. It's got that Mario RPG Chrono Trigger style of you see the fights coming. You even get a traversal tool that helps you get surprise attacks. I love when things come together like that.
Grappling hook.
Grappling hook. I love a good grappling hook. Hell yeah, grappling hook. But the idea that going back and replaying this, or somebody playing this for the first time, there is that removal of friction without making it seem linear or too easy. There are ways that one of the relics makes sailing faster. So while you're tracking things down and trying to do stuff, it's not necessarily getting over a hump. It's just, come on, man, I got shit to do.
Well, travel's another thing too, right? At first, all you can do is walk. Then you can use your boat. Then you can eat. Then you can literally fly as a ball of light, right? So everything that was annoying about the slowness of things, you never have to do that again once you hit the next goalpost.
It ramps up nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is a good place for us to wrap up and bring people back with a timestamp from the spoiler wall. To wrap up my thoughts on this game, I think there are few RPGs that hit the perfect mix of gameplay, narrative, design, and music that I am looking for. It is just a perfect cohesion of what I want out of an RPG. It's why I've had friction with other retro RPGs that folks have loved. I think it's so hard to get the perfect amalgamation of everything. Some games get close. I obviously still think to this day Chrono Trigger is the pinnacle for it, but like this game comes pretty close. Jeff and I, for many years on this podcast, have said that probably one of our favorite indie games of all time is Shovel Knight. And while that still holds true at this moment, the only game in my history of playing indie games specifically that has given Shovel Knight a run for its money is this game. I've just been obsessed with this game on a level that I have not felt since Shovel Knight. Now, admittedly, I haven't replayed the original Shovel Knight in a while, and I haven't replayed this since I first played it. So we'll see over the years how that shakes out. But for sure, this is number 2 with a bullet if it isn't number 1. And it is easily something I recommend to anyone who loves retro RPGs or is just looking for an RPG to play in a vein of what they've never played before. I think this is not my number 1 recommend for a new RPG player, but it's up there. I think Super Mario RPG will always be my number 1 recommendation for a new RPG player. But I think if you're looking for something interesting, you are curious about what the indie landscape for RPGs is, I think this, like Chained Echoes and a few others, is definitely one of the poster children for what indie studios are doing with great RPGs.
Yeah, I would recommend this for people who are playing more modern RPG games and didn't have the nostalgia for those older games. If you do have the nostalgia for those older games, play Sea of Stars. You're going to love it. But if they didn't, this is a great one for like, so what's the big deal? Why do people love it? You can put this in their hand. It plays on all modern systems right now, and it has the spirit. It is one of the reasons why Shovel Knight is in such an honored position for me and Matt, why we love the game so much is it understood the assignment. It knows what we loved about those games and gives it the evolution it requires. It understood the assignment. And Sea of Stars does that for turn-based RPGs, and I freaking love the game so much.
Yeah, one of the things I haven't said yet is this is the first game in a long time that I didn't want to put down. I do a lot of gaming where it's like, I game because I need to fill up time on the train. I game because I'm home and I want something to do. I was excited to pick this up anytime I could. I was carving out time to play this because I wanted to know more about the story, because I wanted to explore the world, because I wanted to solve more puzzles and I wanted to fight these fun combat fights. Yeah. It's the best ringing endorsement I can give it.
Yeah. It's got a lot of complicated systems and fun pieces like all of the good crunchy old RPGs do, but they overlap on each other in nice ways. Puzzles are in combat. Timing is in combat. Something that I didn't say before that I want to get on the record. It is a turn-based game. It doesn't have active time battle, but because of the way that you know ahead of time how many turns you have before a move happens, you're able to combine certain attacks. You get the double and triple text style of Chrono Trigger and that same feeling of urgency while being able to take all the time you need to make your choices. And it's so interesting to see a game that completely goes against the ethos of the thing you're like, oh, but it's like that, because it is. And it's exciting and it's fun. And so there's always something to do. And I second Sarah's sentiment of, yeah, no, once I got into it, I just needed to find more time to play it whenever I could.
Yep. So if you are back from the spoiler wall and weren't spoiled and haven't played it, go play it. If you have been on this journey and played this game already, thank you for listening, but go play it again anyway.
Tell us about stuff we forgot. There's so many areas. We didn't talk about Malcolm Mud at all.
Literally not even once. This is a game we love. I'm so happy to hit 350 episodes of side quests. Honored to have Sarah here for this. Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Of course.
Please let us know in the comments down below or anywhere on the internet where you can find us what you think of Sea of Stars, what you love or don't love about it. We would love to hear your thoughts as well. As we like to say, this podcast focuses on the fact that every game is somebody's favorite. But also plenty of games are not people's favorite, and those opinions are valid as well. And we love hearing vibrant discussion about the games, especially when it comes to side quests. So thanks for joining us on this journey as always. I can't remember, Geoff. We don't do any of the Patreon stuff for side quests, right? That's only for the main show.
Yeah, it's only for the main show, but also it's really nice as far as plugs go, where all three of us are basically the whole production house for Fun and Games podcast. So wherever you're getting your podcast, listen to side quests. You can also listen to our main show, and you can go to certainpov.com to check that out and other fantastic Certain POV podcasts and all the stuff we're working on.
Also, rate and review the show. It helps so when folks search places like iTunes and search for podcasts about Sea of Stars, this will jump to the top of the list, and we really appreciate that. Yeah, Geoff and I do a lot of the active on the podcast work, and then Sarah makes sure we eat at conventions, which is very important because we would die if we didn't eat.
You would.
Nobody plans a schedule better than Sarah Moonen, and we are grateful endlessly for it in our production.
Always happy to help.
Thank you, Sarah.
And happy gaming.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Geoff.
What's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.